Oh,
Recorded May 13th, 2024. Please keep your hands off the red button, Brody. How are you doing,
I
Rob?
Did he do it
know.
again?
I
No,
did
we're
it
still
2
live.
weeks ago. I felt so bad. I had to go and where's my eyes go to the first red button and no. Isn't that where the
Yeah.
leave button is in Teams? Maybe that's what does it.
Yeah, let me look at that.
I
There's got
think
to be
that's
a
I think that's
reason.
why
There's gotta be a reason
think
why
it's the
you do
5th
that.
time now I've done this. So I will take all of your criticism. That's fair.
Fifth?
I think it's you're just a practical joker. You just love to you
Honestly, I
laugh
don't
and
mean to
laugh.
do it.
You don't have to over apologize. It's only 3 times.
Oh,
Not
I
5.
counted 5. So if you're counting 3, then I'm doing better than I thought I did. Here, let's open this up. I think it's the red button in Teams. That's why. Let's see.
Yeah. So
That is. Yeah.
red means stop. Normally,
Yeah.
green means go,
And
Brody.
it
Well, I
says,
mean,
and then you know it's a
I'm just gonna
stop when
alt
it says,
F4. If I need to leave the stream early, I'll just alt it. Yeah, it is. It's the top right leave. That's why. In Teams, it's the top right. It's the leave button. That's what gets me. It's the same
leave.
area where you leave a call.
Yeah.
But Team doesn't have the thing that says in stream.
Yeah. Isn't there a song, like a country song,
I
like
know.
you're always leaving or something like that?
Yeah.
And
How
a
you guys
dialogue
doing, man?
box comes up. It's like, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, yes, guys, yes. Let's go.
Yes, I need to go now. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's usually
Stop that.
it's usually bathroom related, right?
No, I have a lot of fiber in my diet now, Rod. I'm doing just great.
good.
Things are great.
Good.
Wow. The
Thanks
show
for
is just
asking.
totally degrading until
Everybody out there, make sure you eat a lot of fiber. It's good for you.
it's
Take
good
care
for
of
you.
your guts.
Like ocean spray. How you guys doing, man?
I'll let Brody go first since he could go at any time. He could hit that red button at any time. I'll let him go first.
Oh, I thought you meant to the bathroom. But go ahead, Brody.
Either one.
I'm doing good. Last week was awesome. I was telling my co-hosts here I had to unexpectedly not be on the show, which I was very sad about. But I saw the recording with Chris and it went awesome, as I knew it would. But last week, basically, like this is my last week of work with customers. I'll still be around until baby comes, but I was it was just on-site meetings, get everybody prepped. We're designing this whole data protection and governance program for this and strategy for this customer, and we crushed it. We crushed it all week. We crushed it. It was fantastic. And then I took the day off on Thursday because I went to the mountains and I played some golf and did a golf fitting. My buddy's a pro at one of the golf courses up there, so it was nice and sunny. Got to get out of the office. It was great. So things are good.
I was actually really referring to you could go at any time because this is your last week, right? The
Oh yeah, I think I'll be on Monday. It's actually it's a long weekend in Canada, but I don't think I'm doing anything. I'm just kind of hanging out, making sure that when Amanda's ready to go, it's time to go. You know,
it seems like it's been forever since you first told us that you guys were pregnant, and now the time is here, right?
Now the time is here. Yeah.
Now you're trying to buy more time. Can I get another couple of months?
Honestly, I just want to rip the Band-Aid off because everyone's like, "Oh, you're gonna lose sleep." No, it's like okay, let's just do this. I get it.
You want to rip the Band-Aid off, but you're not the one giving birth.
She wants to do it too. She's like, in 2 days, I'd be stoked because she's been killing it and still is killing it. But these last couple of weeks are very taxing on the body for various reasons, right? So whatever she needs, I'm here.
I see Noodles here.
That's newly Microsoft christened Noodle, by the way.
Yes, Noodle is finally at Microsoft. It's his dream. Let's all give Noodle a round of applause. Noodle, who crushes our
really.
Discord
I'm not
channel.
a clapper. I'm
a clapper. I will clap double for Rod. Noodle has joined his dream company, Microsoft, and now he can hassle us in Teams and see our status. So that's good and bad.
I expected him to bother me more. I don't know.
So,
I just kind of expected.
He's been getting fire hosed with trainers.
I tell you, bothering me is that old Trevor. I'm just bothering you, Trevor. Hey man, you got to put in an official email. You're bouncing all over the place. We'll get that figured out. I think I know the answer to what you're asking. Trevor's been pinging me about some API exposure for MCAS or MDCA on some of the alert tables. I think I figured it out. I got a trivia question for you two guys, since you've been on the show for so long. All the show listeners, and I mean our listeners, these ones that listen on a regular basis, contribute. How many have gone on to apply and get hired at Microsoft?
Oh, apply and get hired.
Like, I think the answer is 2, but my brain's like, no, it's 3. There's a third you're not thinking of. So it's definitely Noodle and definitely Trevor.
Matt Zorich.
Yeah,
was
Matt.
one
Yeah,
of
that's
them.
3.
Noodle.
Yeah.
Trevor. Let me think. Who else?
Is there another?
And then there's the alternate question: how many that have been on the show that left Microsoft?
Well,
I know
we'll
of
talk
a
about that,
couple.
but
Yeah,
the
we're gonna
fourth
keep
one is
positive.
the fourth one is the one that we first took on as sort of a mentee of the show, Asia in London.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
right. Oh, cool. Okay.
He's doing well. Yeah.
Perfect.
So everybody pinged me, hey, I'm at the big house now. So Zord came on, and so the answer is 4, because I actually went back through all the shows and everybody that's on the Discord channel and all that stuff, right? And good stuff, man. So
great stuff.
Brody didn't do anything last week. Ryan, what did you break?
Everything last week.
Well, other than getting rust poisoning last week, there's a story there, right? I was at that conference. Everybody knows that because we had the show on Monday. We talked about that, but talked about Copilot for Security all week. I think I delivered the first ever content to be used by Copilot for Security as part of a session last week, because I literally I co-presented with Harjit. I don't know if Harjit's not actually been on the show, but I think everybody knows Harjit. But we can talk about him later. We co-presented on something. He had a session that was like just link heavy, and a lot of times in sessions, people are like trying to take pictures of the screens and stuff because there's so many links and resources, and I hate those myself. So what I ended up doing was dumping the PowerPoint to a file that could be ingested in Copilot for Security, show people how to use the file upload feature, and then you could just search the session deck for all the links instead of having to take screen captures. So I thought that was kind of interesting. However, and the product manager of that saw that I was doing that, and she reached out and said, man, that's a really good use case. We're going to have to think about that. But the rust poisoning, huh?
Go ahead.
I was going to tell you about the rust poisoning because I don't want to just leave that hanging. The hotel that I was at, the Radisson Blu, and I'm just going to say it publicly because they apologized, but they didn't give me any discount or anything. I was on the top floor, and you wouldn't expect this to happen, but the bathroom sink rust just coming out of the faucet. And I didn't realize it the first 2 days. I was using that water for the coffee maker. And I don't normally do that, but there was nothing else. And I used that for coffee maker. Like second day, man, I was wrecked. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And I realized, I looked in the sink, and the water that had dried there, it just like dried orange. And I'm like, what the crap? So yeah, I drank rust for 2 days, and then ended up, the conference is attached to the Mall of America, largest mall in America. So I went on the hunt for this huge jug of water, and that's what I used the rest of the week for my coffee and brushing my teeth and all that stuff. So
it would be called the Rodney Blue when I was done.
Holy crap.
I better call Saul. I mean,
yeah,
we had that happen to us, my wife and I, on a cruise ship, and we didn't pay for cruises for about a year or so. And then on their publicity, right? That's dangerous,
yeah,
man.
you would think they would have given me something, because I went to the front desk, and I wasn't mad about it. I just said, hey, this is something you all need to check out when I check out at the end of the week. I thought for sure they would say, well, let's check it out now. They didn't say that. I even texted it to them with a picture of it and said, hey, I just want to remind you, I did stop down at the desk. I didn't know it about the person I talked to. She may not have worked there very long. I don't know. She took it down as a little note on a little notepad. Who knows where those things go? Probably just in the trash at the end of the day. And so I texted them and everything. Same response. Oh, we apologize for that. Thanks for letting us know.
You took it much more laying down than I would have, because
I was laying down at some point.
Did you get a tetanus shot for your guts? You basically got iodine poison or something, man. You don't know what the hell things. You got jaundice.
I got it out. I was once I got some good water. Once I flushed it out, I was fine.
Now this show is totally going crazy. Let's get on. Anything else you break?
I didn't break anything last week. Oh, other than I did I think I mentioned it on the show last Monday about that Copilot for Intune. Remember that? And I said, there's no such thing. And so I talked to the product team and they had to change the slides for the rest of the week because it is Copilot in Intune powered by Copilot for security. There is no such thing as Copilot for Intune.
There, yeah. It's
Glad we got that straightened out. That sounds
splitting
very
hairs, right?
straightforward.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hey, so last week, let me share my screen. I was talking about something inside the Defender portal, and I was trying to lab something out, and thought Frank was in my lab breaking stuff again, and I thought it was really cool, and started reading up on it, and I couldn't find it in time. But I actually found two things I want our listeners to see for those that are on YouTube. So let me present, share screen, window here. So inside the Defender, what screen are you guys seeing? Are you seeing my Defender screen?
Defender
See
XDR,
your
yeah.
credit
Critical,
card status.
critical asset management.
So this is what I was talking about, the critical asset management here, where you can go and have classifications around what you consider HVTs, or high value targets, or high assets, right? And I'm used to doing this in Defender with identities, right? Your CEOs, things along that line, and then maybe their particular devices that they work on. But I didn't really play in this, and I realized, look at the things that they classify as critical assets management, and you would think, you know,
SCCM.
that makes sense. You
Yeah.
know, because if I can compromise your lifecycle management stuff, I got you.
Yeah.
Right? And then you look at these here certificate servers, and I said, I got to go around and play with this. And, you know, I don't deliver, you know, on projects anymore. So I'm like, oh, okay. You can go in, create a new classification. Like if you have a group or a certain type of machines, maybe this is where you're doing research on, you know, genome splitting or something like that. But you can see whether some of these are already built in based on previous threat actor attacks and things along that line. And you can see that it runs last runtime, who was created by. Some of these assets I don't have in my environment, but if they are onboarded in your directory, they automatically come up on the classification because the status is on, right? So you can see that it says I don't have any SCCM in my lab. It's enterprise admin 3, domain admins 3, administrators. You know, this is pretty much my lab, and I'm multi-tenanted here, power users and stuff. And I noticed that when I was playing around with MDE, any of those groups you put in there, you can add these in here too. So VMware Center, you see, I don't have anything. That's pretty cool.
That's
I would
beyond
encourage.
cool. That is
Yeah.
extremely important. It's showing all of the key admin roles for on-prem in Active Directory, and it's also showing the key roles for cloud-based assets, and then it's also showing servers and like groupings of assets that are extremely important, or tiers. You call them high-value assets, tier 0, right? Or tier 1A, like kind of stuff. That's really cool. I didn't know that was a thing. I'm gonna
And
look
the cool part about this is I figured out how to put an alert in that if the number is deprecated or decrease or increase, I know. So if all of a sudden I'm starting seeing domain controllers when I have a distinct number of domain controllers and or enterprise admin go up, this is another thing. Like, why did that go up? Right? That could be a DC sync attack. Someone's putting in a row domain controller. So that's one thing I wanted to show. I'm going to play around a little bit more. The lab is finally up and running real strong now. Thanks again, Trevor, for helping me with that VMware stuff. Number two, we're talking about exposure management, but there was a announcement about a new initiative added to it called the Zero Trust Foundational. And so as you go through this, I think they say they announced it at RSA for public preview. I was like, oh, this is cool, because you hear this whole thing about zero trust, and everybody, it's a buzzword. Some people think it's a product that we sell. It's not. It's an initiative. It's a framework. But now, as you're consuming Microsoft products, you can go in and look at, give me something to sort of gamify or pivot against to see exactly how I'm doing. So I think at my lab, for the most part, you know, to get a 69 when I didn't really purposely go do any of this stuff. Probably Frank's in here because he's doing stuff for his JTAs. But when you look at this ransomware protection, I got a 62. Identity, probably because Brody's an identity guy. I take his, you know, expertise and I add it here, and you can see some of the workloads I have. No data and internal except this here. I don't know if it's because I'm not using it or enable something, Endpoint security 59 could be better. Critical asset match protection, that's here where it pivots over to the other thing. Cloud security, I got an 88, and I got some workloads, but we generally turn them up and down as we don't need them in the lab, right? So what I'm also going to look at and make a suggestion is, where are your initiatives around Copilot and SEU and I think someone consuming that, and are you using this Copilot in an ethical way, or not ethical way, but efficient way and
Responsible.
secure way, responsible. Yeah, there you go. Because in cloud app security, MDCA, it's like 500 AI apps that it can detect now. 500 AI applications that your user can just download because they're SaaS applications, right? And I tested that by signing up for a new generative AI product called Perplexity. You probably used it before, Rod.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good. You get to choose your large language models. I like it.
It is, but it's blocked by default on Microsoft
It
managed.
surely is, because it seems to be crawling and scraping.
Yep.
You'll notice, if you go through it, it doesn't list Microsoft as one of his large language models, but he does list ChatGPT and a bunch of others, right? So I just wanted to show our listeners this. I couldn't really figure it out last week. I couldn't find it, but check it out. I'm going to assume that you have to have my lab have all the SKUs in it, right? I just pay for it, and that way I don't have to worry about.
That's what I was looking at too. Boy, I suck at a lot of that.
I don't have all of it. What before we let our guest on? Where in the settings did you get that last capability that showed the?
At the very bottom.
No, not in this one. The previous thing you showed, Edward.
Oh, I'm in settings,
XDR,
Microsoft Defender XDR, and then critical asset management.
Huh. More and more my E5 Visual Studio Developer E5 account is getting more and more annoying, as I'm trying to do insider risk management, adaptive protection, which is super cool for a customer, and it's like, you need compliance E5. I'm like, oh no, not this again.
Pay for
you
it.
need E10.
Tax right off. I got E7. Hey man, we're 23 after, which is extremely long for us to get into it. It's about 7 minutes over, and we want to make sure our guests have as much time as they need. So we have a friend of the show. He's been on before, Mr. Drew Nichols, and we also have his partner in crime, my partner in crime too. I guess we are still GBB peers, Mary. And if you want to talk about cross cloud security, you're not going to find the better two here. Just these two individuals get it, right? Especially around CNAP. And I like listening to their stuff. And I was in some CNAP thing the other day. It's pretty good. Drew, welcome back.
Thank y'all so much for having me. Yeah, Mary and I, like you said, we've been doing kind of the CNAP space for quite some time. And like that really just kind of pivoted very closely to exposure management. And so, Mary, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Drew. Hey, everyone. It's good to be here. It's first time here, long time listener. But yeah, I've been working with Drew for a long time in the CNAP space, and we're very excited about what we're doing, kind of pivoting more into exposure management. So I see Dean's comment in the chat about getting Brian on here. Fortunately, you're stuck with us, but we're also pretty excited about the work that we're doing in that space, and sharing all of that with you. I think Edward gave everyone a little bit of a preview, but we'll dive into that even further.
Oh, I didn't mean to steal your thunder about that.
That's all right.
Totally
we were like, should we just leave? We can drop now. You got this.
Totally swung and missed. This was something I had on my notes. Like, hey man, go back and
yeah, both
you guys gonna give
both
a better
those are on our list too, so that's great.
Okay, well, I apologize, but sure, come in and make fun of my minuscule knowledge about the product, and guys go through it, right?
No,
So
it's perfect.
I did not know.
I can't wait to learn from the experts and not just Edward.
Whatever. So, tell us about this in a more informed fashion, because you can see that I was just Easter egging. I was actually looking for something else, and this came up. I'm like, what is this? Scratching my head. So if you want to give clarity, show some screens. It'll give better insight about what I was trying to describe.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. I think that's how a lot of organizations kind of discover some of the new features that we slowly kind of sneak into the products. But maybe we just start a little bit with some of the challenges that we've been seeing in the space that led to this investment. Talk about the journey that we've been on to get us here, and then we can very happily just continue to build on that demo that you were giving and go from there. Sound good?
I'm sorry it wasn't the devil. I feel super bad about it now. So yeah,
You should.
absolutely.
No, don't feel bad about
Can't
it.
believe you did that, Edward.
It's all right. I thought it was planned. Honestly, I was like, that's perfect. That
Well,
just
so
teed it up
today
great.
we want to welcome Edward to talk about what?
We're not gonna talk about it.
CTEM and exposure management. All you,
Yeah.
Edward.
Well,
Go
give
ahead,
us
You want
Edward.
to
give
share your
us the
screen out
history.
again?
Give us the history. I've had a brain fart all day. When you work at
One part.
Microsoft, you hear all these things. Give us a journey to this, to how we got to this particular product, because I honestly can't tell you, was this an acquisition or home built?
Yeah, well, I think like most things that we do, it's a combination of both, right? We've been on this journey for a very long time, and through a series of in-house things that we've built, and then acquisitions that we've continued to integrate and build upon, we've kind of gotten to this point. But you know this, and then for anyone that's listening, Drew and I both work in very customer facing roles, and so we're chatting with organizations all day, every day about some of the challenges that they have. And what we found is that a lot of the pieces are there today, these individual components, but what's missing is a lot of the context that brings all of that information together. And so that's where, when we're talking about what have we built versus what have we potentially acquired and brought into the Microsoft portfolio, it's a healthy mix, because we think back to some of the earlier posture management solutions we had, like the identity security
Mm.
posture management, where we were looking for things like unused accounts and legacy protocols and things like that. That was there as part of our Defender for Identity or Advanced Threat Analytics solution. And then when we look at where we built from that, so the Defender vulnerability management, right? A combination of things that we built through what was in Defender versus things that we acquired through the Defender for Endpoint solution and evolution there. So bringing that data in, the Risk IQ acquisition was another big
Mm-hmm.
one, right? Like we tend to look at security a lot from what do we know about our organization today, right? What are our assets? What's the connectivity between them? But an attacker doesn't necessarily have that view, right? They're often looking at these organizations outside in, using a lot of open source tooling. And so Risk IQ helped bring that in, helping us look at each of these organizations from their outside attack surface. So that's another one where a little bit of an acquisition, but then we further built on it. And so what we're doing on the exposure management side is kind of like what we did with XDR, right? We took these individual components that were very solid in their own right and brought them together under that umbrella, right? We had an endpoint protection solution, we had an identity protection solution, we had a CASB tool, and we brought that all under XDR and started to integrate them more. And so when we think about exposure management, we're taking all of these individual components that I've mentioned and then just bringing them into a single umbrella where we can get that contextual insight across them. And I'm sorry, Drew, I have just been
No,
chatting away.
No, I think what kind of Mary's talking about is like our journey, but one of the things that we got to really think about from our customer standpoint, right? So for those that know, I used to be on Dart for many years, and one of the things that time after time when I'm doing my investigation, I mean, 0 days are like we see the movies and everything, like a hacker gets in with a 0 day. That's not how it really works, right? Like they're logging in to an exposed like 3389 port, or that someone's clicking a link and they're downloading malware, and a domain admin's logged into the device and they're just like, boom, Mimikatz, the domain admin. We've done a study at Microsoft, and it kind of echoes what I'm saying. There is 99% of successful attacks are due to just basic hygiene issues, right? And so we're not trying to answer the 0 day issue with like exposure management. What we're trying to do is get rid of the noise. And so in the industry, there's a new term called CTEM, or continuous threat exposure management. And this is the whole idea of our exposure management solution, is this idea of shifting your mindset. I always give the example, right? If you have two servers, one server's got a 9.9 CVS score, another one's got a 9.0. Historically, we would go straight with the 9.9 because that was the higher number. That means critical, that means bad. But when you take your hat off and you start looking at the server individually, that 9.9, maybe a developer stood it up. It's not on the network. It doesn't have any privileges to do anything. It doesn't have a managed identity. But that 9.0's domain join, it's on the network. It has direct access to your DCs. Maybe your domain admin's logged onto the box. So if I compromise or exploit that 9.0, now I have a much more impact on your business. So the whole idea of CTEM and for us exposure management is this idea of looking at the potential blast radius of if a vulnerability or an exposure is exploited. So
Great point.
Well, and thinking about what you just said, I think the way you started that was still kind of focusing on kind of the simple things that should have been done in the first place. And then because you are customer facing and because our tools evolve over time, are you still seeing that majority of customers still kind of need to start there?
Well, I think that's part of the problem, right? Is that we
Yeah.
tell customers there's these foundational things that you should be doing to protect your environment. But when you look at the complexity of the environments customers are working with, right, a lot of them are moving to the cloud and they have a variety of different resources, right? They still have some stuff that's left on-prem, very common that we're working in a hybrid state. And then also they want to take advantage of a lot of the different efficiencies offered by each of the different cloud providers. So it's not just now we have on-prem and we have Azure, it's now we have on-prem, we have Azure, we have GCP, we have AWS. And the size of the security teams isn't growing, right? We talk about this a lot. We're just expected to cover a lot with the same number of resources. And when we're moving into the cloud, we have so much flexibility and it's constantly evolving and we're constantly introducing new features like we were just talking about with Defender. Look at these new features that just suddenly popped in here. So the security team needs to be aware of everything that they're actually responsible for and then also aware of what the recommended practices are around securing those resources. So we have a hard enough problem securing just on-prem environments, right? And that wasn't necessarily changing significantly. And then we've almost gone like full speed ahead when we move to the cloud. And so we look at it like what you could have stopped 99% of these attacks with some really basic controls. And customers are like, well, there's this list of hundreds of thousands of resources that I'm responsible for. What do you mean I just needed some basic controls? What controls do I need? Where do I start in this list of everything that seems critical? But if we're treating every single recommendation like it's critical, we're effectively not prioritizing a single thing. So I
Right.
think
If
that's
everything's
the
critical,
cycle that
nothing's
we're stuck
critical.
in. Exactly.
If everything's important, that is important. Let me ask another question around that. So, as I open mouth and started foot at the beginning of the show, is the what was the first thing of the show? The
critical asset management.
critical is that also part of the exposure management?
So that's actually kind of the foundation of it, is that if we take our lens off of CVS score and really turn our focus to where are our critical assets? That's why, why this kind of branched off from the Defender CSPM or the CNAP is if you're familiar with Defender for cloud security posture management, one of the driving things on the criticality based was if sensitive data was at risk. So a lateral path movement that would allow you to access sensitive data. We're taking those same attack paths, but we're also bringing in things into the critical asset management like domain controllers, domain admins, workstations. And so we're taking those critical asset management and we're mapping all of the potential risk and the attack paths to those critical assets. So now I can start prioritizing my remediation. Like Mary said, if all I keep seeing is critical, and I don't have any context of if it's actually exploited, what could happen. And so that's what we're trying to answer is here are the things that if this is exploited or this exposure is taken advantage of, your DCs are at risk, your sensitive accounts are at risk, your sensitive data is at risk. And one of the concepts that we came up with is this idea of choke points. So if you think of a choke point, maybe it is a single resource that could affect 9 different critical assets. So if I just remediate that one choke point, I've eliminated those 9 different paths. So it's also prioritizing based on what could have the biggest help or impact to my organization by remediating.
And I think that kind of sums up too. Sorry, Brody, I saw your hand come up and I started just chatting right over you really
You're killing
quickly.
it. Keep going, Mary.
I think what Drew said kind of sums up very nicely the paradigm shift that we're in from vulnerability management, where we're prioritizing based on like the threat type and the severity. And the difference when we move to that CTEM model is it's not just about the type and the severity, it's about the context around those recommendations and how we focus the remediation strategy itself around the recommendations that are going to have the biggest impact to our particular business and our assets.
It seems to me that this is a long response to the criticism around. Oh, I'm sorry, bro. You have your hand up? I swear.
It's okay, man. It's okay. It's okay. We're just all ragging
I don't
on
see
you
the little
today.
hand and teams go up,
No,
right? So I'm sort of.
I know. I
conditioned.
didn't want to
Go ahead, bro.
interrupt.
My bad.
Yeah, I was being a polite Canadian guy. Super quick, because I'm sure you had something really smart to say. What I'm seeing here also is a pattern of Microsoft making it more obvious to customers who may not have that in-depth knowledge to understand what those critical assets are and what you need to be focusing on. This is another example of that. So Drew, you used to be in Dart. I worked on my first CR. So Dart came in, right? I worked with those guys. CR. I got exposed to like how we execute on tier 0, how we protect tier 0 assets, identities, same deal. And the customer just has no idea, right? Because nobody stopped to tell them like, oh, hey, all of these, previously Azure AD, now Entra ID admin roles, these are critical. You need to lock these down. Not anybody can have these, but they don't know that because out of the box, it doesn't tell you that. And then what did I see come from Entra ID? I saw privileged account, that new preview feature where it's like calling out privileged accounts that you need to be aware of. And now I'm seeing it here with this exposure management capability. You're like, hey, by the way, just out of the box, these are your critical assets that you need to be looking at, right? We're talking accounts on-prem, we're talking cloud assets as well. I like that Microsoft's making it more obvious, or giving customers the tools they need to like get the journey going without having to have expert consultants come in or someone with that background information, because you shouldn't have to wait for a reactive compromise situation before you actually learn about these things. Ideally, you want to learn about it beforehand, right? Protect yourself.
Yeah, and I think I'm a little bit more sensitive to it, attempting to pass the GCFA. And when you look at forensics, you look at what things could have been done in preparation for this, because I think I said on the show a few times back, when you get Dart in and you get Mandarin and you get whomever else, how many hours are they burning because you're not properly, staged for an investigation and an incident response? You can, the percentage has to be low double digits of organizations that are really prepared for an incident response out of the gate. So when someone shows up, I don't have to go back and try to turn this login on retroactively. It's useless now of a sort, because now it's hard to put a timeline together and what did they say? The evidence of execution a lot of times, things that have happened. But let me ask you this: is this product? There's two questions actually. First one is this: it seems like this is a long-term direct response to the criticism that Secure Score wasn't that. They were like, Secure Score was gamified. We had 5 of them, right? Or maybe 6 of them, right? Identity, 365, all these things. This seems
Running
to have
out
a
of
little bit more.
fingers there.
Yeah, they were all over, right? And so people are like, well, you're not giving me any context. It says do this thing, and if I do this thing and it makes my score go up, what else did I improve alone other than that spot thing to do? So I like the way this is laid out. That's the first question, or basically a comment. Let me ask you this: my lab is sort of, big shout out to Katrina Quake for putting my lab in all of the private preview stuff. I just see stuff getting turned on, right? How do you consume this? I made a joke about the license. How do you get this exposure management? Because when I went to my lab, I saw it there. I'm like, when did I get there?
Yeah. So right now, and you may have noticed a few other things since you're in all the previews, right? We're pulling in a lot of different components all into that same portal. So it's part of a much broader effort to unify the entire security experience. We're bringing exposure management in, we're bringing Sentinel in, we're bringing the Defender TI data in. The way that we're looking at exposure management right now is it's not necessarily a new solution, right? We're taking all of those 50 secure scores that we had before and bringing them into a single score, a single prioritized recommendation set that you can work with. So that's part of that journey. But it's really more, and it sounds a little cheesy to say this, but I think it's the correct way to say it. It's more of an architecture than a new solution. So it is in public preview right now, which is why you see it there, why others should be able to see and have access to this within that unified experience. In terms of whether this is going to be part of E7, I saw somebody's comment in the chat about the EX SKUs there. The formal business model for it is still being defined. So I don't want to stick my foot in my mouth and say anything here. But right now it's more of, you have EASM, you have the identity security. I think that joke is very funny.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I thought
the chat disagrees, but big fan. And so it's taking those individual components that you already have that's already part of your licensing. And so if you have CSPM as an example within Defender for Cloud, then that's going to be one of the feeds within exposure management. If you have Defender for Identity, that's going to be one of the feeds within exposure management. Same thing for our vulnerability management solution. If you have that solution and that add-on, it's a feed into exposure management. So exact specifics on what that's going to look like, I think since it's in public preview, it's still a little too early to say. But right now, I think that's the best way to think about it, is it's consuming the licenses that you have available. So if you only have some of those, you're only going to see a subset of that data based on the individual components that you have.
But to also kind of agree with you, Edward, on the secure score didn't have enough context piece, but taking out Microsoft's exposure management and really kind of highlighting why this whole continuous threat exposure management arena has became very popular. To me, it's one, if you start rewinding back to the 2017, and I do love Zero Trust, but one of the foundations of it was this idea of assume breach. And what we saw within when assume breach became very popular, we saw this huge pendulum shift to a lot of organizations primarily focusing on the detect and respond capabilities of the NIST cybersecurity framework. And we're starting, and basically now a lot of organizations are just tired of getting popped. And they're like, how do I put my guardrails? Like, I need to really start focusing on, because if you know 80 to 90% of ransomware attacks start on unmanaged devices. We've got to get the foundations back, right? Like, I was in a CISO meeting with a large organization last week during RSA, and we're sitting here talking. He's like, I need my team to get back to the basics. I don't need to really worry about the 0.001% chance. I need to really hit that identify and protect stage. And this is really just helping organizations as an area CTEM, help organizations to understand where your assets are. Because unmanaged devices can be the bane of of a lot of organizations' existence. Where are your cloud resources? That's the big thing. Defender CSPM helped a lot of organizations with is, here are your assets, and here they're at risk. And because a lot of customers just don't know where these are, we start talking, and as we get even more and more into mergers and acquisitions, you start having multiple environments merged together. And so this organization that I just purchased has this vulnerability, and this other organization has this vulnerability, and they're all on our network now. And so it's really just helping organizations just really prioritize. And most studies show only about 13% of vulnerabilities are actually remediated. So if I go back to that 99% and 9.9 versus 9.0, only one of them is going to get remediated. And if I keep chasing my tail on the ones that really wouldn't have a huge impact, I'm just putting myself further and further behind.
Well, and that I think that hits the right point, because I've always kind of gotten the sense from customers, I've always believed that the secure score was a distraction, because people were more focused on the low-hanging fruit. Let's change the score real quick, and all of the other more critical things were happening behind them. So yeah.
And you're right, because it's not an easy job to go in, and you have the technical thing, but the hardest thing is prioritization. Because if you stop to kick rocks at every barking dog, you'll never get down the road, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like Secure Soil was always barking about something, and the low hanging fruit, marginally increase something, and it probably did provide value. But when you would change something and the score would go down, you scratch your head, or you make no changes and the score would go up. And so now you're looking at who did what, and it could be something as simple as, well, my score went down because of we added all these whatever licenses, and then we didn't turn the controls on, or we deprecated some licenses to E3 or whatever it may be. I saw some strange situations, but this is actually pretty good. But my other question is, is even though it's all here, there's a lot in our Defender portal, right? There's a lot in here, and how is that the reason that the CTM, you said, continuous threat exposure management? Yeah, there you go. How is it that if you have all these things, is there still prioritization in here? Because if I get to set my initiatives, I know it's a lot of customer approval and prioritization that's necessary, but does Microsoft make any best recommendations or best practices suggestions in here, or you look at it yourself and go, hey, you figure it out, we just told you what you need to do? Or can I pin it to something and then gives me a checklist of where to get started?
Yeah, I can go ahead and share my screen and kind of add into some let me see.
Yeah, it's sort of funny trying to use this one, right? You could
Don't hit any red buttons. That's all I did.
Drew exits the meeting.
All right, are y'all seeing my screen?
Hit the little present down at the bottom, and then I can push it to the
share screen.
Little present.
Entire screen.
And then pick your screen. And
I think while we're sharing this out too, just to fill some space here, I think one of the things that's interesting you said about everything coming into the same portal. What I find interesting is when we're looking at incidents on the Sentinel side, one of the questions that I get from customers is, well, how do I stop something like this from happening in the future? And I think what's interesting is we can also see data that's coming in from some of those other solutions to say, we saw this incident, here's some recommendations to help you further lock down those resources so maybe you don't see things like that in the future. And so when everything's here in the same portal, we can also pivot directly from an incident where we see certain entities involved and go from that very reactive security model and shift much more to the proactive side without needing to leave that same environment. So I can take a look at the identities, the resources, and see what recommendations do I have around them? What's the criticality of those resources? So it lets me kind of do that end-to-end management of those resources, starting ideally before something happens. But if we do have to address it in the reactive state, after we've seen suspicious activity, going back and making sure that we can lock down that environment and then not have the same issue occur in the future. But Drew, this will be a lot easier to see. So go ahead.
Well, people have been asking for that single pane of glass air quotes for a while now, right?
I know.
We're loading it up. We're loading it up.
I still drop the air quotes around it because we're getting there, and then they're going to realize that they never should have asked for a single pane of glass when they realized how much.
Yeah, they're like,
single
is too much in one spot. Can we separate these out? Yeah,
the single pane of glass is Copilot for security, so
which is also available in the same portal.
Yeah.
So one of the things that kind of to your question, Edward, let me kind of start with just making sure everybody's familiar. So there's this idea of attack path. If something's exploited, I can look at it in a map. I'm going to pivot over just real quick to kind of show you a little bit better of a way. And I will get to exactly to your question in just a second. I just want to make sure that I kind of highlight. So an attack path is all around if something gets exploited, what's the next direction?
And what's cool with this too is that we did introduce this with posture management in Defender for Cloud, but by moving it into exposure management, we can then extend it. So before we were focused very much on like common cloud resources, right? Your PaaS solutions, your IaaS solutions, but we can extend that further, bringing that entire attack path through all of the data we had feeding into XTR, and then also through the multi-cloud resources. So actually seeing something end to end, not just looking at it as your attack path for your cloud resources and then your attack path for some of your other identities and endpoints and SaaS services.
So for example, I'm just going to start with one VM. So you kind of like the attack path, like I didn't show you this whole thing on the other one, but because I wanted to show from like an individual. Let's say I've got a VM that it says it's very critical and it's got a bunch of critical assets with it. So this VM has a ton of vulnerabilities. I can look at all of the vulnerabilities. I can look at the findings. I can look at the exposure of the machine. But from there, I can actually start looking at what can be done if I exploited that VM. So in this case, I can actually access an Azure database, or I can see that this account is on there and I can act as that user, and then I can see all of the assets that that account has access to as well. And so if I extract this out, explore connected assets, I kind of start seeing all of the graphs of all of the different ways that I could exploit this. So this is kind of the attack map. So it gives me an ability to start looking through, like this VM has a vulnerability. It's got a managed identity on this storage account, so I can move over to the storage account. It also has this identity associated that I could act as that user. So if I took that user's identity, I could get to like our GBB Sentinel instance. I can get to the Azure Sensitive Information. So this is all around mapping all of the potential threats if that machine was exploited. But what you were kind of asking, and this is where we start really getting into like mapping our environment. So you kind of mentioned the domain initiatives. I do think the domain initiatives are awesome. It's, how do I secure my environment against business email compromise? Or how do I secure and I'll come back to the ransomware one, but I actually personally really like the threat initiatives. So this is where you actually start mapping your environment against specific actor groups. So a lot of the organizations that I'm working with right now are very concerned with Octo Tempest, or most like cybersecurity folks call it scattered spider, but they are a very identity-focused adversarial group. And then some of the other organizations that I work with, much more in the critical infrastructure space, are very worried about like Volt Typhoon. One of the things that we're also trying to help organizations is with our TI and just in general is not all attacks, like not every customer is worried about the same attacker, right? Like we can't just say you're worried about an attack. Like depending on the industry that you're in, there's different actor groups and they have different motivations. And so if you're a government entity or a critical infrastructure entity, you are concerned about a couple of things. If you're a business that is more services focused, you're kind of more worried about the scattered spider type of attacks. And so it's also the customers getting to map their environment against the threats that are like in their environment. So we're going to just go back to the domain and go to ransomware protection. It's also really about so this is just an overall ransomware attack. We have this idea of security recommendations and impact. And so here's all the things that I'm non-compliant. But what can I do that has low impact but would meet the most, remediate the most threats? And so, for example, I can just filter just by low impact. So, or I can do, because you can see here, like Azure backup should be enabled for virtual machines. Yes, everybody, if you're protected against ransomware, you should have it like cold storage backup. But that doesn't impact very much. But you can see things like attack surface reduction rules will have more in user impact. So you can also prioritize it based on the user and the deployment impact.
It makes sense. It definitely
Very cool.
gives insight to my foot in the mouth, just saying, "Ooh, look what I found." Now I know what I found. I saw this in here, right? Because it was like, "Ooh, candy." This is really cool. And so you answered the question on prioritization because you sort of get a common criteria or a common knowledge thing too, because if you if you strengthen your resilience in a certain actor, you may inadvertently strengthen yourself against another actor, propensity to do things, right? Because they just taking a different way to get your identity and things along that line. So being able to go inside of the portal, look at Threat Explorer inside the Defender portal, and read what actors are doing, and then actually looking at what their tactics are, and then coming back here. I never pieced this together. And now I feel really bad having a brain fart. When you came on, man, I'm so used to associating you with CNAP. My brain just went CNAP. I would have been quiet.
You should have
Oh,
just
no
rolled with
worries.
it and acted like it was all planned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That is.
And what you can see though is like a large part of like CNAP or Defender CSPM is remediation and prioritization. So if you think about like cloud security posture management, that lives very closely in that identify and protect stages of the NIST cybersecurity framework. Defender vulnerability management, same thing. It's most organizations, most cybersecurity people call it like left of bang, right of bang, left of boom, right of boom. So typically things like any kind of SIM, something of that nature. XDR is that right of bang. So after an incident happens, left of bang being before an incident happens, protecting against the potential impact. And so CSPM, Defender Vulnerability Management, Identity Security Posture Management, EASM, all of these tools are in that identify and protect stage. So that's why I was mentioning Mary and I, we're both very deep in the CSPM, but we both also are now covering a lot of the exposure management pieces.
Okay. Yeah, this is super interesting. I don't get to get into the in-depth calls like you guys, like I used to, and just role differences, right? But still being second to the game is good. Seeing all this stuff come out. So as this evolves, what do you guys see the next thing, right? And I'll ask the thing because it's still consuming air. How does Copilot fit in all of this now? Just hypothetical. If Copilot for security, I want to be delivering which one I'm talking about. Is that being considered in the innovation around these products, that Copilot has the exposure to, or the not the exposure, the insight to take advantage of these products?
Yeah, I think you're getting ahead of things, Edward. Here we do have a conference coming up in a couple weeks, Build, where I think we are going to share maybe some more insight into what's planned. Hard to say. But I do think more generically, I can say that with all of the security products right now, we're considering how we can leverage AI more heavily, and Copilot for Security is a big part of that. We have already shared the Copilot for Security integration into that Defender portal. So I think I can pretty safely say that we are building more and more of that experience into that portal, and then just of course bringing it across the entire stack. But by having it in that unified portal, we're essentially being able to bring all of this, power of Copilot to it, right? So the Sentinel side, posture management side, the XDR side. So I think we're going to see more and more developments in that area with what that integration is going to look like and how we can use Copilot to further boil down some of the details that we're trying to simplify as much as we can within exposure management.
Yeah, I asked the question now because eventually it'll get back to Brody, Rod, and I about, our listeners will ping us offline or hit us up on LinkedIn. So I sort of preempt them from asking, why didn't you guys ask this on the show? So Bill, will you two be presented, Bill? Drew?
We will.
Mary?
I'm all conferenced out right now between RSA and partner coming up.
Mary and I both presented last week at RSA, and like one of the presentations was on exposure management, and it pretty much every customer in the room was just nodding their head like, yep, that's my pain points. Yep, that's my pain points. And to your question about like like where this kind of fits in, right? Like, so one of our slides that we do from marketing or whatever has, it's got the circle, and it talks about the XDR, it talks about SIM, and then it says, and we're bringing in the exposure management. So it's like the three legs of the stool. And Mary and I were on a call, 2 or 3 weeks ago with a large law firm, and we were kind of showing this, and we were showing some other pieces. And the first question they asked, like, okay, I found the resource that had the biggest impact. Now I need to pivot it to see, like, was there any alerts, and vice versa, right? Like, so you might see alerts, and then you want to see what potential assets were at risk if that machine or that resource was exploited. And so that's why we're putting it in like the circle, because there's going to be many times when you're doing your vulnerability updates and figuring out prioritization based on the impact, you also want to see, was any alerts actually done against that machine.
Yeah, I can see that as customers' assets, base grows. You got to have some of the stuff that just weave through the noise and get you to the point where you can do the best use of your time. And Copilot for Security is going to be that. And you still need experience and human intuition, right? There's nothing wrong than a good hunch. A good hunch has solved many movie plots, right? I had a hunch, and take a look at this. And you coming from Dart, sometimes you have to really think about, what were they trying to do here, right? Because everything starts off the same, but what were they trying to achieve here to do that? This is really good stuff. We may have to have a part 2 on this, or maybe you guys come on and do your RSA presentation. keep me and Brody off the show. That way I don't present and he doesn't shut you off early. You'll be safe, right?
That's perfect. We can actually talk about CNAP on the next one too.
I tell you what,
Awesome.
I'll hold you to it. I'd like to talk about CNAP. My brain has just been doing CNAP, and we should talk about that very much so. We're getting booked out on Rod.
Well, yeah, I have some other stuff to add to the schedule already, but probably like June or July, something like that, if that sounds good to everyone else. And Drew, by the way, you were on episode 110. I was just kidding with you. I went out and verified.
Yeah. So it was 100 to go exactly. That's cool.
Yeah.
There you go.
But
episodes.
One thing that I definitely wanted to highlight before we talk about the 99% of successful attacks were just due to basic hygiene issues. The flip side, though, is most organizations, like this was a Microsoft study that we found, have over 800,000 exposures for their environment. And I mean, this is like low fidelity, like alerts. This is all kind of things. This is dormant accounts. So when we talk about exposure, though, we are talking about not just like endpoints and servers, but do you have admins and sensitive accounts that haven't logged in 180 days? Do you have applications or users that are over like app IDs or users that are over permission? Do you have cloud misconfigurations? But if you think about like 800,000+ vulnerabilities or exposures, it's just so much. Like it's just so much to take care of. So we've got to have a better way to do our remediation strategies.
Well, yeah, it's you give a great point that what you see in the movies is not reality about the 0 days and instant exploitation of that by these super world hackers, right? Mr. Robot. But I'm writing a presentation for our ISA here meeting, and everyone is vulnerable, no matter what tools. You can put any tool set you want. What you have to do is make the randomness of your vulnerability so great, that the chances are reduced by doing enough of the right things and enough tripwires. For instance, if you're coming back into, from the International Space Station, you don't just get to arbitrarily choose your entry point. So think about your environment spinning like that. You're always going to be vulnerable, but it's where that person is shooting at the time and whether you'll get it or not, right? So what you're trying to do as a customer, if you got a planet that has 19 re-entry points, consider those methods of exposure. Yeah. Your percentage of being exposed, no matter what the rotation is going to be that. But if I take it down to 18 and then 17 and then 10, there you go. Now the actor goes somewhere else. Unless you've already been compromised, you don't know, right? They're just finding a way back home, C2, and you're out. But yeah,
or if they have a teleporter.
Teleporter would work. That's
now you sound like Vasu.
Another entry point. Are we shooting ourselves in the foot, by the way, because our products are so good when a customer turns them on? They're afraid to turn them on. It's scary because they're like, holy crap, look at that. We're exposed everywhere.
Well, to Edward's point, I love when I'm talking to customers about this, I always say the bear analogy, right? Like you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun the other people running from the bear. And like, that's the whole point, is just you've got to be secure enough, because 0 days are very expensive. And I'm not saying for every organization they don't have to worry about 0 days, but there's very few adversaries that are going to waste a true 0 day on, if they can just log in on that exposed server on the internet and then just hang out, like just using credentials and moving laterally throughout the environment. Their path of least resistance and least cost is what they're going after. So if you can just outrun the other people running from the bear, they're going to move on and worry about somewhere else.
We're just a picnic basket. I think that works.
And you're right. I see exactly the analogy working, because if you're outrunning the bear or the lion and it gets the antelope, the other antelope, no, don't go that way or go do something, right? And so now there's a sacrificial series of entities that succumb to it, but now the world knows. That's what they're calling IOCs and CBEs and things like that. Sometimes being that person, I say it all the time. Life is fair unless it happens to me first. Just, I don't want to happen to me first, and life is not fair. I want to happen to someone else first, right? But we really, really appreciate it. You guys coming on, and once again, apologies for not truly understanding the topic, as I wanted to just show what I found. Ooh, the candy. And Mary, I make all the meetings you're on. I see them. I pop my head in there every so often. And, you know, I don't
decline
say
all the meetings I'm on, I think is what I'm hearing.
No, you've never seen me decline your meetings. Not like that. I see you counseling the meeting, the learning between the GBB, but that's offshore topic. So let's get you back on to talk about CNAP. We'll find a date, Rod, before we book out through August and September. Let's get them back on the show. I really want to hear about that and how we tie all this in. And shame on Beth Biscoff not coming on and co-hosting. Putting her out there, right? Anything else you guys want to close with? We're like 7 over. Oh, okay. That sounds like a plan.
Is Beth actually named after the cookie?
She says she is not. She's probably gonna beat me over the head.
It just hit me. Because I had a Biscoff cookie on the flight from Minneapolis on Friday.
I think we told that joke when she was on the show, Rod.
You know,
this is why she's not coming back.
That's why she's not coming back on the show.
Lame dad jokes.
Why she doesn't? No. She won't speak to me anymore. So yeah, for our listeners, we're definitely going to get Mary and Drew back. We're going to talk about CNAP and bring all this together, and maybe there'll be a rehash of this topic to make sure that we segue into it. But I'm stoked about this, right? This is really good stuff. To our customers, if you have this, I know it could be daunting, but our learn material is actually pretty good. If you go out and just take the time to read it and make yourself a prioritization list, you'll be able to do it. Which is why you have consultants and partners, right? If you got the tools, you may not know where to get started. You bring them in to do it. So, well, that concludes our show today. The next show is Monday. As you know, we don't record on Wednesdays unless it's a theme month. It's always on Monday. And we're glad to have Brody as long as we can before he has to go have a baby by proxy. Or the other way around.
Baby.
Proxy baby. Yeah, I'm a proxy baby.
Where I will be the external exposure reviewer of risks at a very high level. I'll be like,
okay, I don't know where you're going.
And it looks like
protecting the little one from everything. I'm gonna be so obsessive over that.
Well, she's gonna have an awesome godfather in Edward right here, so nobody's gonna bother her.
You're not gonna be the godfather, Edward. Sorry.
But we took a vote.
Did we I don't remember this vote.
Edward and I took a vote. It's Edward.
Yeah, I bet you two did. Yeah, a vote of 2. Yeah, no doubt.
She's not dating till she's 35. Period.
I think the important thing to remember here is that you cannot protect them from everything. You just need to be able to prioritize the most critical risks.
Oh,
well, look at what she did on that Out of Culture show.
Wow, bringing it back.
Bring it back in. See, it's always something.
And since you will be changing diapers, assume breach.
Gross.
That's another thing. Well, everyone, thanks so much. We threw some good links inside the show.
Yep.
As we publish the show, we'll put all of the contact points out for Mary and Drew. Watch them, follow them on LinkedIn. If there are any presentations, definitely follow it. Drew and Mary do great presentations. I've sat on a couple myself. And you have any questions, hit us up in Discord or any one of our numerous media outlets. We really appreciate it. Except for Meta. Don't ping us on Meta. Don't do that. We'll be good. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
We'll go
next week.
Peace.
All right. Thanks, Drew. Take care.